This week, Kumar and Dana discuss two works by Ed Piskor, Hip Hop Family Tree and X-Men Grand Design, which show Piskor's nerdiness about both hip-hop and the X-Men. First, I'd like to thank our patrons for keeping this show going. Join them at patreon.com/deconcomics. If Patreon isn't in your budget, you can also send a one-time donation of any amount via PayPal to donate@deconstructingcomics.com. We appreciate your support.
This is Kumar.
This is Dana.
And this is Deconstructing Comics. Welcome to Deconstructing Comics. Dana and I are in Fredericton, New Brunswick, Canada this time, together in the same room.
Yes.
Last time we did this was almost 5 years ago, almost probably to the day.
Yeah.
We talked about the Chester Brown prostitution book.
Oh, yes.
Pay
it
for it.
forward. No.
Paying for it. There was a sequel. He actually did a sequel which tried to prove that the Bible was advocated prostitution.
Sure.
I haven't read it. It sounded like not the kind of book I was remotely interested in reading. But anyway, we're not going to talk about that at all. But we're once again in the same place we were last time, my mom's basement. It's currently, my brother is living down here. That's not a judgment on my brother, but there's super dim light. Now, usually when we have face-to-face podcasts, which is super rare, it's like, wow, this is great because we can actually open up the books and look at the art. But it's actually so dim in here. It's like a love nest.
Yeah.
That I don't know how well we're going to be able to.
We're not going to be able to see anything. Yeah.
But anyway, we're not here to talk about Chester Brown. We're here to talk about Ed Piskor's two major series of the last 4 or 5 years. One is Hip Hop Family Tree, which is up to like volume 4 or 5 now.
Yeah.
And also this book he did for Marvel very recently in the last 6 months or a year, X-Men Grand Design.
Or we should say started.
Yes.
Because it's not done.
Yeah. So do you know any details? Have you read something? Like, is it ongoing or what's the deal?
Just from talking to the guy at the comic shop, my understanding is that so Hip Hop Family Tree, also not finished yet. There's 4 volumes out.
Yeah.
Sorry, the book may be finished, but in terms of the collections, the trade paperbacks, I guess you might call them, although the format's a bit weird.
Yeah.
The collections are I think planned to be 5 volumes altogether. 4 are out.
Of X-Men. Oh no, of Hip Hop.
Hip Hop Family Tree.
Okay, so there's another one coming.
I have all 4. I've only read volume 1.
Okay.
The X-Men Grand Design, my understanding is it is planned to be the same thing. 300 issues, or sorry, 300.
That's accurate, actually.
It is actually.
That is an accurate description. Which
300 pages.
To. Yeah.
Sorry, 300 issues in 300 pages.
Okay.
But which basically what he did with Hip Hop Family Tree is about 300. It's 270 pages, I think, or roughly 300 pages for the 30-year history or whatever. But I don't think he's really doing all 30
He's doing them year by year. Like after Volume 1, it looked like.
Well, they actually say on the front, right? So number 1 is 70s to 81.
Okay.
Number 2 has no year on it, but number 3 is 83, 84.
Okay.
And number 4 is 84, 85. So
Okay.
I don't know, maybe volume 5 is like 86 to 2018. I don't know. But anyway, yeah, so X-Men volume 1 is out, and as I understand it, it is planned to be the roughly 300 pages total. Same as Hip Hop Family Tree.
Okay. All right, well, let's start with Hip Hop Family Tree. So I don't know anything. I really don't know anything about Ed Piskor. I think he had a book from Top Shelf with some weird title like Whizzle Dizzle or Tiddle Whittle, or maybe it's on here somewhere.
Yep.
WYSIWYG.
WYSIWYG. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I haven't read it. I don't know anything about it. But all I know about him, I don't know anything about him. He's one of these kind of new wave of indie artists.
Yeah, he was drawing for Harvey.
Harvey Piskor.
Piskor. I want to say Piskor, but yeah. Harvey Piskor.
His father, Harvey Piskor. No, he did some work for Harvey Piskor. That was maybe his first work.
Yeah.
And he's but he's also of this generation which was very much into And there's a lot of them these days that were into X-Men and, X Factor and X-Force all around at the same time that we were, early, mid-90s.
Yeah. Although Piskor is like probably about 10 years younger than us. I think he was born in the 80s.
So maybe it was even more full-on at the time. At least I had a little bit of filtering, and I was like,
that's right.
Around issue 10 of the Jim Lee X-Men, I was like, I'm not really into this anymore. And I remember I read about 6 issues of that Liefeld X-Force series, and I was like, this is kind of like not as good as it kind of... It seemed really full-on at the start, and there were all those lines, and it was so angry, and... and then I kind of... So I think probably if I was 10 years younger at the time...
If you were in grade 6 at the time, you probably would have been just eating it up.
Yeah.
For sure.
But there's a whole generation of those guys now, and a lot of them are kind of doing these crossover projects now that I feel like Marvel has loosened up a little bit. So there was a period during the bankruptcy era in the late 90s where they were like, do whatever. And then that's when like the Peter Bagg Spider-Man book came out and all that kind of stuff. And it was really wild. It was like the Wild West. And then they offered George Clooney a Nick Fury movie, and he read the Garth Ennis Nick Fury comic and was like, what is this? No. And that's when Marvel was like, no more of this shit, we're reining it in. And then it got really stale for probably 10, 15 years, and I feel like now they're finally like, well, the comics aren't like the movies anyway, and maybe, I don't know what the exact psychology is, but yeah, they're kind of... We're seeing some interesting things kind of creeping in at the edges.
Well, I think just to kind of go away from the comics and maybe a little bit into the business, this seems to me like a brilliant business move for Marvel, because I mean, you've got the movies and you've kind of got like mainstream public interest in the brand. And now you've got this book, which it's not like a Marvel book. It has there's a lot of the art, there's a lot of kind of things. Like obviously, Piskor loves that old stuff. But the thing is, it's this huge format. It's like really kind of like like a premium or like a prestige kind of comic, like very high quality paper, high quality printing. And yet, here it is. Hey, anybody want to get into the X-Men? Here's the entire history in 5 volumes. For $250, it can all be yours. Whatever. It's not maybe not that expensive, but it's not. They're not cheap books, but they're beautiful books. What a great move, like on Marvel's part.
It is a smart move. I do wonder about. Well, I was going to talk about Hip Hop Family Tree first, but we're already in the X-Men, so let's talk about it. So it's basically a chronological retelling of the X-Men history from beginning to end. So all that detailed stuff you learned later on in like issue 160 about who was whose brother or whatever, or this secret pregnancy is all put at the start.
Okay.
Right. So
that was actually a question I had reading it, because I didn't really read all that old X-Men stuff.
Well, you don't have to, because the weird thing is in this trade paperback, which we should say is actually treasury size. Now this is also... I think it's a brilliant move. I think it's hard for shops to sell it, but even bookshops or comic shops. But it's the format of those old treasuries. And when you were a kid and you read those things, they were very rare, special event things. When you found one anywhere, it was a real a moment. When you read them now, it's like your hands holding this giant book. You have kid-sized hands, so you're kind of forced to be a kid reading this thing. So it's a so you can tell, because in this trade paperback at the end they reprint issue 1 of X-Men, and it's basically just you meet the training in the danger room, and then Professor X introduces a new X-Men, which is Jean Grey, Marvel Girl, and then they go off and they fight Magneto at this base. Now, what we get here is we get the backstory of all Cyclops and Beast and everybody before we see them join the team.
Right. Yep.
This is the nerdiest comic I've ever read.
Yeah.
It is like... I read this book about Celine Dion's, that album that had the Titanic song on it.
Okay.
And it was a book trying to understand taste. Like how people can like stuff that's terrible.
Right.
Like probably objectively terrible. And what is the thinking behind that and all this stuff. And there's a very interesting chapter about how when you're a teenager, your musical interests are your currency. You don't have real money. holding on to that thing which you think is good is your cultural currency. It is your power.
Okay.
And I remember reading X-Men and knowing details about characters' backstories with X-Men or Legion of Superheroes, anything that was super complicated, that was a kind of currency.
That was your social currency. You used that to barter with other like-minded individuals.
Yeah. And there was also, there was an article by Patton Oswalt about 10 years ago where he talked about nerdiness is not the same thing anymore because now people can go onto Wikipedia and acquire all this information or just go on the internet very easily. Whereas to know the entire backstory of Hawkman or Cyclops or X-Men or anything like that was so difficult back then.
Yeah.
You'd have to read a lot of issues or talk to a lot of people to get all these little, this guy was actually this guy's brother and there was this plane crash and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's a completely lost thing.
Yeah.
That somehow this Piskor has assembled.
And actually, both of these books are like sitting down with that nerd.
Yes.
And saying, okay, man, like hip hop.
Yes, the music nerd, yeah.
Or like, whether it's hip hop or X-Men, like, okay, from the beginning, all right, well, what happened? And he would do it chronologically. And I think this is a point that I ran into reading mainly the X-Men book, but a little bit in hip-hop as well. But that nerdy guy that's going to tell you the story of the X-Men or whatever, he's not necessarily going to do it like in the best, most interesting, creative, narrative way.
Yeah.
If we could contrast it with something like Pulp Fiction, which is obviously, like not chronological, it's crafted to create a certain impression, whereas this is just, I have information that you need to have, and if I give it to you in this order, it's going to be easier for you to understand. So that's really what Piskor is doing here.
Yes.
It's like he's setting you up to kind of understand the history of either of these two subjects.
Yes. But I will say, I loved Hip Hop Family Tree. I loved the beginning most of all, like the first few pages especially.
Yeah.
So right off the bat, I think it's the second panel, he talks about this DJ that starts sampling beats from two records at the same time.
Cool Herc sounds like.
Right, and it's like that's the first time we had the breaks, like sampling the breaks.
Okay, yeah.
And it's like right off the bat, this is the birth.
This is it.
The emergence of hip-hop. This is where it's all going to start with these two records. And he's like, I'm just going to keep looping these bits. The looping was a crucial moment. But then later on, there's a kind of thing you never hear about. But that huge New York City blackout happened.
Yeah.
And that was an opportunity for guys who could not afford turntables to go out and loot turntables.
Yeah.
And suddenly there was an explosion of DJs the next day.
Yeah.
What a great little piece of history.
Yeah.
Like an amazing moment there that I love that kind of stuff about it. But what I found, my problem was, and it was actually the same with both books, is that if you set it down and you're jet lagged and you go to sleep and you wake up the next day, you're like, who's this guy again?
Yeah.
Who's that guy?
Yeah.
And he also has a kind of style where he introduces people, like he just says, Bob Smith was a kid who ran around, and you're like, oh, was this a guy from earlier or is this a new character?
Yeah.
Because so many people because he doesn't, everybody's of equal importance.
Yeah.
Like certain characters come back a lot, like Africa Bambaataa and a bunch of giants keep coming back, and some people are constant influence. Like there was a producer, what was her name? Robinson something. I wrote her down. Anyway, she was like, like finding talent and producing records, and there were certain people that keep coming back, or they disappear and come back. But a lot of times, the most minor, I guess. I mean, I don't know. Were you a hip hop guy?
Not
at all.
Like slightly. I mean, I loved Run DMC when that like made it to the east coast of Canada.
Yeah.
So that would have been like the Walk This Way album.
Yeah.
And I loved the Fat Boys.
Yeah.
In junior high. And like so I didn't know about like the roots of it at all. I didn't know a lot of the more not punky. That's not a really good way to say it. Like, I don't know.
More underground.
The more underground. I knew the kind of poppy mainstream
Right.
stuff. So certainly later on, Will Smith or whatever, right? Like DJ Jazzy Jeff, and that stuff that was kind of mainstream, crossed my radar. But yeah, I absolutely loved like Run DMC and stuff. But I think that getting back to your point about the characters, that it's really difficult to keep track of everybody, because it is kind of very, very condensed as well.
Yeah. And everyone's given equal weight. That's kind of the thing. You don't like, because I don't know. I was into Ice-T hugely.
Sure. Yeah.
And but I know Ice-T, I knew Public Enemy. I was into a guy called KRS-One. I don't even know if they call him Chris One or KRS-One.
KRS-One, yeah.
He's
in the books a little bit later on, yeah.
But I don't know if characters show up. I don't know if they're a minor figure in hip hop or like a major figure.
Yeah.
Because often they'll show up for a panel or two and kind of like, this guy did this and this guy did that. And I'm like, was this the... And
kind of Piskor's style, which carries over into Grand Design as well, is everything is what do you call it? Captions, right? Like voiceover, so to speak, right?
Yeah,
like
narrative captions.
Narrative captions. Like it's just like this happened, this happened, this happened. Now there is dialogue. There's lots of dialogue. Like people are swearing at each other all the time, But it's like, so Rick Rubin like went to this show in 1989, and he saw da da da, and he met da da da, and and it's all very just. It kind of breaking all the rules of storytelling, and it's very much almost documentary in its presentation, which I felt was really appropriate for Hip Hop Family Tree. It's not always the most exciting read, but it's kind of like I'm absorbing heavily abbreviated history. It's just kind of being shot at me rapid fire. And I felt kind of switching over to Grand Design, where it's a fictional story, but Piskor's style is the same.
It's the same. It's the same.
Exactly the same.
So I was
like Magneto went to Mars. Exactly the same.
I agree. So I was like, when I was reading Hip Hop Family Tree, and he added the little thing in the Free Comic Book Day thing a couple of years ago when he started, and he talked about how there was a kind of a connection between hip hop and superhero comics, and I thought, well, it's a bit of a stretch. But then I started reading Grand Design after Hip Hop Family Tree, and I was like, he's doing the exact same thing. There were certain characters that showed up Hip Hop Family Tree. There was a gang, a street gang called the Casanovas. And they reinvented themselves as bouncers. They were employed. They became employed as bouncers. But they had, the way he draws them, they had all these kind of eye patches and like hair and stuff. And I was like, there's
superhero costumes basically.
There's kind of but definitely the recitation of facts. That currency of knowledge was the same. Was basically the same.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's kind of when you made that comment about nerd knowledge kind of being your social currency in we'll call it junior high school. I think that really rings true with here, and that's why I said it is exactly like if you sat down with Ed Piskor and said, all right, dude, give me your currency and I'll be your friend. or whatever. Like, I'll get a date for the prom for you. Whatever.
Yeah, for sure. Lots of interesting stuff in Hip Hop Family Tree, again, because I didn't know, like, rap battles were real. I thought that was, like, a thing from the movies. Like, you watch those movies like Break-In, where people have breakdance battles or something. Apparently, this was real. Like, they would have a battle. This is how they would actually settle who's the better rapper, and they would go, and I guess it was gauged by cheers. There was this show on Netflix a while ago about the kind of origins of... it was similar, and it was directed by Baz Luhrmann. The first episode.
You're talking about The Get Down?
The Get Down. And I watched the first episode of that, and I've been trying to forget it since, because it was so...
Oh, you didn't like it?
I thought it was so in your face.
It was.
And I was watching it, and I didn't know anything about it going in, and my wife was like, let's watch this. And I was like, okay, and I watched it, and I was like, this is... It was spinning around in my head. It was too much. And I said, this is like something Baz Luhrmann would make. And it got to the end credits, and it was like directed by Baz Luhrmann. I was like, okay.
There you go. I mean, I would recommend it. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And now, it's historical fiction,
Right.
Whereas Piskor is trying, as far as I know, at least according to, I think, his statement in the liner notes, or maybe I read it somewhere else, but, he's really trying to just catalog the essential events and people who contributed to the growth of this art form.
The presentation is the opposite from the Baz Luhrmann. Exactly. In terms of there's the flashiness and stuff. Yes. He's kind of like, this guy did this guy recorded this, and he's kind of like, you look at the panel and you just kind of have to accept the amazingness of it as it is.
Yes.
Like the craziness of them, this movement literally starting from the street.
Yeah.
And there's some stuff in there that I was like, so there's a record store where a lot of the DJs go to shop to look for breaks.
Yeah.
And the store owner has started seeing these kids come in, and he has selected a stack of albums. He's like, these are the ones with the best breaks that the kids will come in for.
And he buys 2 copies of them.
Right. But this guy he's like a 50-year-old white guy.
Yeah.
And I was like, I wonder if that was really the guy working in that shop. And that's another, side story. Interesting thing is, very interesting I found is a lot of the gatekeepers were not white guys, because it was, often that's like, you need your Elvis to get this black music from this stage to this stage. There was not really, everybody was, and it was interesting because nobody wanted to record a rap album. They couldn't even conceive of putting rap on record.
Well, the DJs were left out once they started recording.
Well, that's a whole other thing. But the first thing was, why would you record something they're giving away for free on the streets? Yeah, exactly. On the street corners. Every street corner you can get rap for free. Why would you? How could you sell this? Yeah. And even the people inside were like, this is a live performance art.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why would you record this? It doesn't make sense to record it. And when people start recording it, they're like, this is wrong, or these people are sellouts, or something like that.
Yeah.
And also the audience is kids with no money, so why would you actually record this stuff? So there was that kind of whole kind of thing too.
Yeah.
But yeah, the gatekeepers of it exploding was like, there was that Miss Robinson woman, whose name I can't remember. But it's very interesting that she was very savvy, and to me it was very interesting that the Sugar Hill Gang was like, you often think of them as this like explosive creative force, but she just found these guys and said, you 3 are going to record. I think she even hired them out of a limo. There was some story about the limo. But one guy was literally, he had his friend's tape. His friend had made a tape.
Yeah.
And he was like, can I borrow this? And he would listen to it at work, and he would rap over it. Mm-hmm. And she came in and heard him, said, you're going to be a rapper.
Yeah. You're going to be on this album.
You're going to be on this album. And then she found 2 other guys. They were assembled in the same way that like the Backstreet Boys or something. Like they found them in a mall and put this band together.
A lot of them were,
It was totally artificial.
Like well, I just wanted to make one final comment just about the Get Down. And I think people who enjoy this comic should try to track down the show. They may not like it as you didn't, but a lot of the characters in that show are, what do you call them, like amalgamations of actual historical figures, which I didn't know. When I watched that show, I didn't know how much of it was history and how much of it was the fiction, because it's historical fiction. Like all the main characters are completely fictional, but there's Grandmaster Flash is in there, like Cool Herc is in there. What was the one that... anyways, I forgot the example I wanted to give, but like there are other examples of characters. Oh, right, the graffiti artists.
Yeah, important. Yeah.
So very, very important part in Hip Hop Family Tree. Yeah. There's a character in the Get Down who is a different name.
Yeah.
I think if I remember correctly, it's a different name, but he looks the same in the TV show as he does in the comic book. So they're obviously, in the comic, it's the actual guy who was like exhibiting with Basquiat and stuff. This crazy stuff. And Warhol and all that. Whereas in the TV show, it's just like one of the guys, one of the main characters or whatever. But anyway, so there's some interesting comparisons to be made, but that's not this podcast.
No. But I love that you mentioned the graffiti thing, because you don't really realize how much the scene was organically connected to the hip-hop scene that was emerging, and that was emerging and was starting to be considered art. I really loved when Debbie Harry and Blondie showed up, because for me, that song, Rapture, for me was listening to it in 1992 as this kid in Fredericton.
Yeah.
Was like, this is the most intolerable, dumb rap I've ever heard. This is so stupid.
Yeah.
And then I read this and I was like, oh, this is like important.
Important, yeah.
This is like a really crucial moment in rap and new wave and all that stuff that was happening. And
I love that.
she was like legitimate. She recognized the legitimacy of these street artists.
Yeah.
And was like, I'm gonna write a song about you.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was wild.
Yeah.
Now I'll never listen to that song again.
Yeah, like sure, it failed in some way, but now it kind of has a context.
Yeah, yeah.
And you kind of recognize it. And it's one thing I also loved. I flipped through, as I said, I think at the beginning of this recording, I've only read the first volume of Hip Hop Family Tree, but I flipped through all of them, and I was just kind of trying to get a sense of how far they were going, how far he was going with it. And yeah, I really noticed a lot, like there's the Debbie Harry stuff, and there's a lot of the punk scene and stuff like that, like Johnny Rotten shows up because he did some stuff with somebody, and anyway, and plus these two movements were kind of, well, I mean, punk had been around, obviously, for a while, but they're kind of growing together.
That's interesting, too, because you got Malcolm McLaren artificially assembling the Sex Pistols.
Right.
Right? Like, kind of creating the scene or jumping on the bandwagon in the same way that Sylvia Robinson did with
Smokey Robinson's daughter or something like that, I think.
Is that real?
Is it mentioned? I think it's in here. Yeah. But anyway.
Okay. Yeah, that was a really cool thing to find out about as well. Yeah. I will say though that although every character about the name, all the minor character stuff, sometimes because they have alter egos, right? Sometimes they become rappers, so sometimes you don't know who you're hearing about,
and their names change.
And then their names change, or you don't realize, oh, this guy became Run.
Yeah, right.
Right? Like 70 pages later.
Yeah.
And a lot of text later.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of text. Yeah. Yeah, those guys I actually knew because I was pretty into Run DMC, as I said. But yeah, even in Volume 1, DJ Run or whatever.
I was kind of, considering the amount of text, I was kind of a little bit disappointed that I didn't realize how early it was going to cut off. I didn't realize it was going to be 80s, I guess. I didn't look at the cover
pretty much,
clearly enough, or like 81.
Yeah.
But Rick Rubin shows up, and he's kind of an interesting, weird guy.
Yeah. Really at the beginning of his career too. Yeah.
Oh yeah, he's not he's just his parents are rich. And totally supportive of him, but he's kind of rebelling against their support. Like, they don't care what he does. His dad drives him to all these punk gigs and stuff, and somehow he's kind of discovering, the rap scene. And I do wonder if we're going to get around to him producing Slayer's Rain and Blood in 85, 86, if that's ever going to get mentioned in there.
That's like, okay, so yeah, that's right. So Volume 4, I said, ended at 85.
Yeah, so are we gonna find out how Slayer ended up on Def Jam? Because that's always been an amazing thing to me.
Yep.
Yeah. Also, another interesting was we talked about Grandmaster Flash, and to me, I mean, the message was also, that was always and still, I thought, one of the greatest songs ever. And it's amazing to know now that he wasn't even on it. So this was also very huge difference between the early rap and the current rap is which you learn about in detail in this book, is they want to go in the studio to record an album, but you can't because you don't own the rights to the loops, to the breaks.
Music.
You don't have the music.
Yeah.
So they're like, they're stuck. They can't actually license it. Sometimes there's some sneaky stuff going on.
Yeah.
Later, Sylvia Robinson hires a house band to record stuff that sounds exactly like other stuff. Interestingly, Doug Wimbish, who became the bass player in Living Color, was one of the guys in the house band, the bass player in the house band. That's
cool.
I loved to see him turn up.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was another really interesting thing about it as well. What I found was that the first 10 pages, it's very linear. It's like there's one guy in a corner, he figures out how to spin 2 albums at once or whatever and get these loops continuously.
Yeah.
But then people start coming in, and suddenly it branches out, and there are all these tiny twigs of branches going.
Yeah.
And I found by the end of 1981, it's like there's so much going on.
It really is a family tree.
Yeah,
Like,
and exactly. And then you get other cities. So it starts out, in like Brooklyn, Harlem, Queens, and it's very localized. But then suddenly you get mention of Andre listening to a hip hop album as a 6-year-old or something.
Yeah.
In LA.
Exactly.
Yeah. And you see the edges of it sort of coming in, so I can't imagine what 85, 86
that's the thing, right?
is going to be like.
Volume 4 is where you get Dre and Ice Cube and like the basically the West Coast guys. Yeah, because there wasn't too much happening. Like the movement was Harlem.
Yeah.
Really? I mean, in the late 70s, early 80s.
Yeah.
I want to correct myself.
Okay.
I misremembered. So Sylvia Robinson was a former child singer and songwriter. I think child singer I misremembered as being like... I recognize the name Robinson, but no, she may or may not actually be any relation to any other famous Robinsons. But anyway, do we want to talk about the comic at all?
Yeah.
I mean, we're just kind of talking a lot about hip hop, which is absolutely fascinating.
Yeah.
But I mentioned sort of the the writing style, in that it's dry isn't the right word, because he's a little bit funny sometimes.
He's especially funny with Rick Rubin. Like there's some because he does those contrasts in the panel where his parents are like super nice, and rich, and they're like, "Hey, Rick," and Rick's like. He's really antagonizing for no reason, and he's got scruffy hair, and he's like a punk. And,
he's a punk.
So he almost deliberately pokes fun at Rick Rubin.
I think there's a lot of really. I wish I'd written.
Every character has a face. Every no matter how minor, they have a different face, which is great.
So I was just going to say,
So
So going back to that comparison you made between superheroes and hip hop, like. Piskor has that cartoonist skill of like, all right, how am I going to identify Rick Rubin? He's pretty easy because he's like the one of the 3 white dudes. But how am I going to identify Africa Bambaataa or Ice Cube? Like, what do they look like? So they've all got their little tell. There's the guy that's got the eyes. I forget what's his name. The lisp. Like really major guy in the early days. But he's got a lisp and he's got eyes that point in different directions, and that that just those sort of visual cues that are really important.
But even I think way beyond the superheroes, like even the ears and noses and lips and shape of the face and all that stuff was very meticulous about that.
Really well drawn. And I love other little visual things, and I've got some other things to say about X-Men later, but I love like when they're at a concert. I thought I had a bad printing.
Okay.
Did you have that at all? Like when they're at a concert?
Oh yeah, and there's
colors
blur.
are all offset.
Okay, so so we haven't mentioned that this is also done in Treasury size.
Yeah.
It's done like a Marvel or DC Treasury edition. I don't know why.
Yeah.
It's done in faux faded, faux yellowed paper.
Yes.
Also, like you're picking up this thing that was printed in the 70s.
Yeah.
So there does seem to be some deliberate blur on some panels. Like we messed this up. I don't know if it was it only the concert scenes, because then you'd be getting the bass, the brown sound.
It is.
Okay.
It is.
Right.
Or it's like any time that they're like blasting. So if you flip to like the contests or whatever that they had, outdoor like DJ contest, of course. There's one right there.
Right. So it's the speakers.
It's the vibration.
The speakers are vibrating the comic,
and it's every time it's happened. Like every time they're in a concert, and I thought it was just like, what? I get like a misprinted page or something, but it's not. It's like that panel.
Right.
I mean, sometimes it's a page or a series of panels, but
no, it's so specific.
So there's a lot of really cool visual things that they do. It's not just the art. That's like in the printing design of it.
Yeah.
Which they also do in, not so much in hip hop, but in X-Men when they want to show whites.
Whites. Yeah, that's exactly the thing. So because the pages are artificially yellowed.
Yeah. And even textured.
Yes, and
like you can see the pulp of the paper. Like if you've read those old comic books, those old floppies, or even like old newspaper strips and stuff, that's what these books look like.
Yeah.
But they're tricking you. They're not that.
But yes, because when he leaves the whites for somebody's power, somebody's energy power, or sometimes Iceman stuff.
Yeah, they want to highlight the eyes.
It shoots off the page. It's like
it just pops. Yeah. Really cool.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's Piskor or if that's like an editor or who that is, but whoever that is, like that's a.
I think he has a lot of control.
I don't doubt it.
I think but the interesting thing to me is the volume of output. So most indie artists aren't producing this many comics. Like these are hundreds of pages. So Hip Hop Family Tree is like 100 pages a year. And he's doing X-Men Grand Design, which is another 100 pages a year.
Yeah.
That seems like a huge amount of material. And he has, like, he's drawing in ligne clair, like almost Tintin style, very tight, detailed. The brushwork it's a very thin pen line on the inking.
Even that style changes too.
Yes.
Like, I don't know if he's going to do it with Grand Design, but when you flip through Hip Hop Family Tree, like he's got different panels like from different eras. There's a Jim Lee panel.
Right.
Like in volume 4 or something.
Okay.
Or I don't know if it's Jim Lee, but you're like, that's like an early X-Men or something.
Okay.
There's some stuff that looks like Archie.
Right.
There's stuff that looks like, I don't know.
Yeah, this is where my
well, there's actually an interesting. There's a page in Grand Design which is based on Little Nemo in Slumberland.
Okay,
where Jean Grey's having this kind of dream, and she even wakes up in the last panel, much the way Nemo would wake up in the last.
Oh, is that the one where she's in the fantasy Camelot?
Yes, that one. Yeah. So. Yeah, I don't know. That's the kind of stuff that an editor can't really go in and muddle with. I think. But it amazes me that he's outputting that much and drawing. There's so much drawing on every page and so much text. He's lettering it himself, and there's so much text.
He's lettering it, really.
I guess. I don't think he's letting anyone else do anything. There's no other credits on there except
there is a credits page.
Executive producer, collection editor, editor. They're all just editors.
I would consider them development editors, like they would be giving advice during the process, but I think once he's inked it and stuff, I don't think they're going to make corrections.
Ed Piskor is credited as the cartoonist.
Yep.
Chris Robinson is the editor. Then you've got Cebulski, who's editor-in-chief.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not seeing anything here for like lettering or even like inking and
Even
stuff.
in fact, the reprint of the Stanley Jack Kirby X-Men #1 at the end was colored by Piskor. Recolored by him.
Awesome.
So
awesome. Yeah, so he's busy.
Yeah.
And it's weird that he kind of, I guess, he was working with Piskor and he's done some things before, but it seems like this is a huge project.
Yeah, like this is my third project.
He's got to know somebody, right?
Like, well, that's an interesting thing too, because I would like to know, so when you propose a series like Hip Hop Family Tree, which is published by Fantagraphics, how do you get them to approve of something? Okay, I want to do this treasury size thing.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, maybe it's getting into bookstores, like not comic shops, but bookstores. I don't know. I wonder what the hip-hop community thinks of it. I would love to go online and read some reviews of it.
That would be interesting,
that are from the inside.
Apparently it's a best-selling series.
Yeah, it is apparently doing well, because they've gotten 4 volumes, which isn't something you wouldn't really... Yeah. I think it's kind of surprising.
But yeah, for sure, when you go back to the pitch, how did he
walk into that office and what did he say?
Yeah.
But I think at the time, though, that might have been sort of a similar time with that Netflix miniseries.
Yeah.
And I wonder if there's some other stuff on Netflix as well. I don't know if it's actually produced by Netflix, but there was the was it the Straight Outta Compton?
Yeah,
movie.
That's right. That would have been around the same time.
That had like Ice Cube's son or something played him.
Oh, right. Okay.
There's some family connection there. Anyway, I watched that quite recently. But yeah, and it seems that there's a maybe, I don't know if it's a resurgence, but there does seem to still be a very much active interest in hip hop.
Yeah.
Like in the last within the last half dozen years.
Yeah.
I would say. So, yeah.
Could be right.
Maybe that's something where people at Fantagraphics were like, you know what? There's a market for this.
And probably someone in there was like, maybe this is important history that needs to be recorded in another medium.
Yes.
Perhaps.
Has it even been... I guess somebody must have written a book about it.
There are documentaries about the history of hip hop.
It's kind of goes back to the cartooning and the comic bookiness of it. The visuals are way better.
Yeah.
Than having. I can imagine reading a prose book about this and all those names flying at you, but having faces and the outfits and the part where Sylvia rebrands. These guys come in street clothes, and there's two panels, and then she's got them in these flash outfits.
These suits, yeah.
Yeah, these suits, and it's like, oh yeah, this is, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Is really, it's almost like comics are the best way to tell it. I think even better than a TV series.
For sure.
Or documentary series. Because how much footage do we have of that? Of these people that were being ignored, or photographs?
No, absolutely. Well, I think there's not any footage of most of what actually happened back then. Now, I did see an actual documentary about the birth of hip-hop, and there were interviews with a lot of the guys, because most of them are still alive.
Yeah.
Now.
Yeah.
And how long is that going to last? Not very long. So I think, here in the 2010s, the teens or whatever, people are like, filmmakers or whoever, historians are like, we need to go out there and interview these guys now, before they're gone.
I don't know if it's slightly related to that. Right now there's a car commercial, and it's showing in Australia. I don't know if it's showing here or anywhere else. I don't remember which car it's for, but it's got Grandmaster Flash in it, in the front seat, bopping along to the message while this white bread driver drives around the suburbs. And this affected me on many levels, let me tell you, because as I said before, the message to me is one of the most amazing, powerful songs there is.
Yeah.
And anytime I hear it,
hip hop music video or something.
And one of the guys wasn't even, somebody's lip syncing. There was a whole thing. That's in Hip Hop Family Tree.
Yeah.
The whole thing's a hot mess. And actually, Grandmaster Flash wasn't even on it because the DJs weren't. That was a shocking reveal to me in there.
Yeah.
But to have him, that song in a comfortable suburb, middle class suburb, driving around in a car with him in it is like such a revelatory moment of like, this is where we are 40 years later. And this book is kind of about the emergency, the blooming legitimacy of hip-hop in 1980, 81.
And when you're a car commercial,
and once you've reached car commercial stage,
Pink Floyd,
something is gone. There's a kind of mention about this, how street level, it's not even a mention. It pervades the atmosphere of it. Is how much it's right on the street, and nobody even wants them in the clubs.
Yeah.
Initially, they're like, you have to play. Who wants these people in a club?
House parties is where it was.
Yeah, it was like the street. They were playing in on basketball courts and in the streets, and that was kind of that whole other reaching that stage of kind of like, this is the right time for this, because we do need to capture this before there are more car commercials.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like it's reaching the end point where we're losing what the message of the message was. Crazy.
For sure.
Coming up is Grand Design True to X-Men History, an Easter egg in that work, and more. If either of these works by Ed Piskor sounds interesting, you can help this podcast by picking them up from Amazon. Just go to deconstructingcomics.com/Amazon and make that your bookmark for future purchases. We'll then get a percentage of what you spend. It costs you nothing extra and helps us cover web hosting and the other costs of presenting this show every week. We really appreciate your support. It's DCP In Touch, where we hear from our listeners. On Facebook, Paul Spence commented on the Katie Lane interview in episode 601. This was a great interview, Tim. Katie offered a lot of useful information about intellectual property rights and how creators can protect their interests. Her comments on how to find the right attorney were also on point. Bill Bruford, who was one of the founding members of Yes, recounts in his autobiography how one of his bandmates had his royalty rights negotiated by a divorce lawyer. Things did not turn out too well for him. Thanks, Paul. If you have any comments or questions for us, write to mail@deconstructingcomics.com. We're also on Twitter @DeconComics. We have both a page and a group on Facebook, or you can leave a comment on the blog at deconstructingcomics.com. We'd love to hear from you.
Are you willing to follow me on a journey and risk getting lost in the swirling maze of past ages, protected only by our red indestructible capes as we break through the final unexplored realm of the time barrier to explore the fantastic Silver Age adventures of the world's greatest hero, Superman? If so, join me each week on the Superman Fan Podcast, as together we'll follow the Man of Steel, his cousin Supergirl, and his closest friends, Perry White, Lois Lane, Jimmy Olsen, Lana Lang, Batman and Robin, and others in Superman's never-ending quest to defend truth and justice in the pages of Action Comics, Superman, World's Finest Comics, Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen, and Superman's girlfriend Lois Lane. Go to the supermanfanpodcast.blogspot.com, available on iTunes and most other podcast aggregators. You can also follow the podcast on Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, Medium, Flipboard, and Stitcher. And after you listen, feel free to send email to supermanfanpodcast@gmail.com. And unless you request otherwise, I look forward to reading your comments on future episodes. And don't forget to wear your red indestructible cape, standard safety equipment for traveling through the time barrier.
Now let's talk about the non-historical accuracy of X-Men Grand Design, because there's some interesting things in here.
All right.
So
this is going to be all you, because as I said, I don't have any like big background in X-Men.
You don't need it. Did you read the Stanley? Did you read the Stanley bit at the back? That's the X-Men #1.
No.
Okay. Well, if you read, you're in a better position, because if you read this X-Men Grand Design cover to cover, which contains the first 2 issues of Grand Design in this giant format, plus X-Men #1 in this giant format. So it's got the 4 male X-Men training, and Professor X is like, here, do this, fly over here, shoot your ice, all that stuff. And then he says, X-Men, I introduce you to a new X-Men. This is Jean Grey, the Marvel girl. And then they have a mission, and they go out and they fight Magneto. Now, Ed Piskor gives us...
that's the issue 1.
That's issue
X-Men.
1. Now we have the retelling in the first 100 pages of the book. That is not how Jean Grey enters the team.
No.
The team, they're on a mission, and then Jean Grey emerges in costume and saves them. And they're like, who is this person? And it was like Professor X had kept her secret from them. So he's changing stuff. So it's not even the continuity.
Now, is he changing it though, or is that maybe something that got retconned by another writer?
I wondered about this. So there's another important one was there's this guy Larry Trask who built the second wave of Sentinels. And in this version, when they fight him, Jean Grey makes him shoot himself. Or something like that.
No, she makes him see himself mutating, and he commits suicide due to the trauma.
Okay, right. In the
kind
original,
of an important distinction.
In the original, my recollection is he turns on the Sentinels. The Sentinels detect him as having mutant DNA, and they kill him. Now, which is more tragic? I don't know. But if he was not a mutant and she made him think he was a mutant and he killed himself, that seems like it has less of a...
Well, it's going to have more traumatic effect on her because of the guilt of making someone kill themselves.
Well, that's an interesting thing too, because there's some... One thing I loved about it was you can see some of the retcons. You can see the seams that he is... Okay, now he's doing it in order. So in the old days, something would have happened, and then 50 issues later, they would have changed it. Here, you get it in order. So there's a bit where Cyclops kills a guy in class, in school. Because the guy a bully takes off his glasses. And he can't control it, and he burns the guy up.
I couldn't understand this.
He burns the guy up. almost immediately we find out that was a false memory implanted by Mr. Sinister.
Yes.
I bet you $100 that when this originally happened, they wrote that scene where he murdered the guy.
Killed the guy.
And then for 10 years, the editors are like, Cyclops is a murderer. We need to fix this somehow. And then they had this plot line many years later where Mr. Sinister came in and changed his memories.
Yeah.
And there's another one where Professor X creates a double of himself, and the double gets killed, and then Professor X comes back. And I was like, I'll bet you $100 that they killed Professor X. And then 10 years later, they were like, how do we get out of this? And they revealed 10 years later that he had actually created the double at that time during that storyline. And that was the one that got killed.
I'm sure that the actual comics history is way messier.
Yeah.
And I would speculate that Piskor did not actually make any new changes. I'd be willing to bet that he did the research and he went back. He's like, okay, what are the 5 explanations given for this thing over the 300 issues of X-Men? Okay, that one's obviously crap. Okay, that one's not going to fit. This and he's picking which one he's using. I would speculate that he didn't actually make the changes himself.
Okay, so I'm going to say 2 things about the Jean Grey thing and the Trask thing. So the Jean Grey thing, let's assume you're right.
Yeah.
Why did they put X-Men #1 at the back of the book, which directly contradicts events which are depicted 50 pages earlier? That's very strange to me.
Special content, bonus content.
Yeah.
Bonus DVD.
Yeah.
That's all.
That's okay.
That's my...
All right.
Which is why I didn't read it.
Right.
I was just like, okay, I don't have time to read it.
Yeah.
Boom.
The Trask thing, I went on to...
I love that Iceman turns himself into a snowman and
stuff. He was a snowman in the early days.
He's such a goof. And then 10 years later he's like this icy crystal.
They never actually... I thought he was... I don't know when that got explained in the comics or if it was ever explained, but Piskor does not explain, because early on he's the snowball guy and later he's the ice guy.
He becomes the ice guy, yeah.
The Trask thing, I went onto Wikipedia and read up, and the explanation there was that he got killed by the Sentinels. So I don't know if maybe the Wikipedia is not up to date. I don't know exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, you'd have to.
It's hard to say.
So here's the change from snow to ice, but that's just a. Sorry, I'm looking at the cover.
On the cover, yeah. But they don't explain why.
They don't explain it. It's just new costumes.
Yeah.
Well, I think these costumes are for when the X-Men were quote unquote independent.
Right.
When Nick Fury basically
shut them down.
Yeah. But anyway, that's interesting about the Trask thing. But yeah, I would be willing to bet that like Marvel timeline's got to be such a mess.
Yes.
Like a huge, hot, steaming mess.
Yeah.
And Piskor just had to go back and say, okay, what's going to work best? What's going to get from point A to B?
That's true.
Mess.
So yeah, you're saying he didn't change the Jean Grey thing for dramatic reasons.
He selected the Jean Grey thing for dramatic reasons.
Well, if he so, I think he would have to select the most recent one.
It's possible.
There was a series even 5 years ago called X-Men: Children of the Atom, which updated the origins to modern to 90s.
Okay.
And that was a kind of a cool series, especially the first 2 issues were drawn by Steve Rude, and they were really beautiful.
Yeah.
But it is kind of all that kind of rewrite stuff has been ignored in this. This is as if it was kind of from
this
the 60s.
starts with the New York Namor attack.
Yeah.
Which did they actually give a date? I feel like there's actually a date even.
Oh yeah, I'm not sure.
On the 50th night of what day? One fateful day in the 1900s.
Okay.
So he's narrowed it down to a single century.
Okay.
And we do see skyscrapers and the Statue of Liberty, so that we know that it's after a certain date in the 1900s.
Yeah.
But
yeah, but this is another thing, much like Hip Hop Family Tree, where if you put it down and pick it up the next day, if you don't know your X-Men, because when Magneto first shows up as Magnus,
he's not Magneto.
It's World War II,
and
he steals Captain America's shield and does all this stuff, and you're like, you don't really know. I actually thought it was some speed guy that they couldn't see, and then I was like,
Oh, okay.
It's Magneto. And
Okay, yeah.
kind of, and there are a lot, again, much like Hip Hop Family Tree, there are a lot of minor characters that are given as much weight almost.
You know, oddly, I think that people who have watched the recent X-Men movies
might get it.
would actually get this.
Yeah.
It's because I got it, and that's why I got it, because
Right.
of, was it Days of Future Past, First Class, so the ones with whatever, the new actors, not Captain Picard, but...
Yeah, the one with the guy that was Leto the Second in Children of Dune.
Yes.
The other Dune actor. I can't believe how much I'm farting on both the Magneto
Blanking on all the names here.
I can tell you every movie
And I
he was
watched
in.
Atomic Blonde last night, which has the Scottish guy in it, who
Okay.
plays Professor X.
He was also in the new Alien movies, the Prometheus one.
And everybody listening to this right now is
He's
having
in
an
Split.
aneurysm.
Yeah, I know. That's just one of those things where listeners are freaking out. And he was in Split, the M. Night Shyamalan movie. And
Tim, who is that actor? You know movies.
in the studio, yeah. Anyway, yeah. So those two movies. So there's a World War II thing even in the first X-Men movie where you see Magneto
That's right,
at the
yeah.
concentration camp
That's right.
bending the gate and stuff. So I probably should have picked up on that.
So yeah, I think that's one cool thing is that I don't know, I don't want to give Piskor too much credit, but I think he's very, very aware of the modern audience, the potential modern.
I think Marvel would be too. Otherwise,
and also he said he's doing this. I mean, partly it's a love letter to X-Men, but he's also doing it. Like he said, I read an article where he's like, I'm doing this because I want to create something. If people want to get into the X-Men, it's like any comic. It could be Spider-Man or Superman or X-Men, whatever you want to get into. Where do you start? How do you figure it all out? He's like, $200 investment. There, you're up to issue 300. Have fun.
I would argue that he's failed.
Okay.
Because I think it's a neat book.
Yeah.
Like I love the nerdiness of it.
Yeah.
I love his art again. All that stuff, the weird presentation of it, the narrative.
Beautiful.
It's framed as being narrated by the Watcher.
Narrated by the Watcher, with the recorder.
I'm into all that stuff. But like Hip Hop Family Tree, I had trouble keeping it straight.
Yeah.
And I think anybody, and I didn't recognize who's that guy. Who's that guy? I think it'd be very hard for a new. Well, maybe if you watch the movies, you could read it and transition to the comics.
That's the thing. I think that's what it is.
Yeah.
It's people who watch the movies. Maybe they've got it. Even the Avengers movies or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, they're obviously not too much overlap in the movie worlds of those two franchises. But I think anyone who's like gone through the movies and been like, you know what, I want to read the comics. Whew, good luck.
Yeah.
But maybe 5 volumes of this.
Yeah.
Then you might be able to pick up, issue whatever of X-Men 2018.
It's interesting because there's at least because this is only volume 1. I wasn't sure what was going to happen because there's some loose ends. Like we learned that because it's chronological, we learned that Professor X got some woman pregnant and left her, and that never comes back. We don't know who that kid is. Do we?
We do.
Okay.
Oh wait, actually, I think this was a miss. So actually, I might be thinking of the wrong woman because it's David. What's the woman's name? Legion. It's Legion.
Oh, but Legion doesn't. Is he actually mentioned?
Yes, he's actually on one page. Oh, and I don't have the page numbers here.
Okay.
Let's pause. So that actually was a point that kind of bothered me. So, this is Professor X in the womb. And then, so he meets...
Well, you know what else isn't mentioned there is another interesting thing is Professor X had a twin sister in the womb, which is not mentioned. That's in the Grant Morrison run.
Okay. So, there's Moira. He meets Moira. They have their love affair. She leaves him.
Her name's Gabrielle.
It's the woman he meets in Jerusalem, in Israel, maybe.
Okay.
So Gabrielle, here she is.
And then he leaves her pregnant at the end of the page.
Gabrielle, a few minutes later she's pregnant. I just wanted to find where her name, because I thought he said her last name.
Okay.
Anyway, maybe not. Anyway, Gabrielle, So
she's pregnant, and then he takes off, and then he finds Jean.
Okay.
Then we flip forward. We get some Scott Gray stuff here. Or not Scott Gray. Cyclops, whatever his name is. Summers, there we are. And then we flip forward several pages. Where is it?
I'm gonna have to reread it.
Here it is. Here, this is Legion here. I had the strangest feeling my daddy was nearby. Is this possible? Am I crazy? I'm not. Am I? No, David.
Okay.
And the thing is, there's somewhere where they mention his last name.
Okay.
But the problem is that the last name matches the woman in Israel or whatever.
Okay.
Hagar or Hader.
Okay.
Hader. Anyway, but in this page, David Legion is actually in a research facility, Muir Island, with Moira McTaggart.
Okay.
Which is weird because Moira was not the pregnant lady that Professor X left.
Right. Okay.
But we do know that Legion is
so
Professor
somehow
X's
she was
son.
there. Okay.
So yeah, there's definitely gaps even here, but Legion is in 2 panels.
Right. Okay. Actually, now I'm thinking that Grant Morrison run was 15, 20 years ago now, so maybe that's been retconned out.
That's possible.
The twin sister. Who knows?
Yeah, right.
The Phoenix Force. Phoenix Force starts to show up, but does not possess Jean Grey. So I reached the end of the book. I was like, oh, that hasn't panned out yet.
Not yet. Yeah.
I think it's besides it being super nerdy, it is crazy. Like reading all the X-Men history compressed
Gabriel Haller.
Okay.
David Haller. That's Legion.
I should have picked that up.
Sorry. I just watched the show.
Right. Well,
recently,
you picked it up and I missed it.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Yes. Craziness.
Yes.
It's like if you tried to compress every episode of General Hospital into one episode or something like that.
Yeah.
So much stuff happens.
Yeah.
And I was like, how many issues is this covering? And because it's not quite chronological, he didn't seem to be going along issue by issue, but
not issue by issue, but chronologically sort of.
Yeah, and we don't know how he gets up to a certain point. I can't remember where the cutoff was, but it only gets worse. Like
I think it's roughly 1 page is an issue.
Oh, interesting.
Roughly.
Interesting. Okay.
But again, I think someone's got to do a deep dive.
Oh, because you did say 300 pages, 300 issues.
Yeah, right. So there's at least a numerical equivalency. Although, timeline-wise, I'm sure that he's got to mix it up just to make the narrative work.
If he is changing things, I wonder if they are considered to be in continuity things, or if this is a side project that is not. Because would regular X-Men readers get into this? This is the kind of art that they complain about.
Yeah.
This is the reason they don't read indie comics.
Yeah.
So I do wonder. I think the transition audience, which you pointed out, is probably the audience that they're aiming at.
Yeah. Maybe me.
Yeah.
Never really read much X-Men, read quite a bit of Wolverine, watched all the movies.
Yeah.
Kind of enjoy the lore or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's undeniably a beautiful book.
Yeah.
The guy's obviously a massively talented cartoonist.
Yeah.
And he's pumping out a ridiculous amount of content, as you said.
Yeah.
So it's hard to not recommend the book.
Yeah.
But who's it for?
Yeah. And I had, like I said, I had a little trouble keeping track. But I kind of like not being able to keep track because it did kind of remind me of the madness of X-Men comics.
Yeah.
And even reading them back in the day, when you started reading, you didn't know what the hell was going on. And I remember I would read issues and I didn't know if they were. I read an issue, I think my first was 215 or 16, and I think it was Storm goes to some place, and Chris Claremont in those days would give you a lot of, he would hold your hand, he would tell you everybody's powers and shit.
Yeah. This is Storm.
Yeah. So she goes to some mansion and she fights these 3 dudes, and I thought, okay, I don't know who these dudes are, I don't know who Storm is, and many years later I found out that was the first appearance of those dudes. But you didn't really know.
But they were like important dudes.
No, they weren't important. They were the dudes. They were the enemies of that issue. They were the villains of that issue.
Right,
She fights these 3 guys in a mansion or something like that. But I thought they were regular villains, and I just didn't know anything about them. But it turns out that was the first time they'd ever appeared. There's no way to tell. You're in this soup. You're swimming around. You're jumping into the pool. You got no idea what's going on. And even when I tried to come back during that Jim Lee Liefeld era, it was like, is this the first time I'm seeing this guy, or has he been around for 20 years? And you don't. And often the way Chris Claremont would write was like the first time Cable and Wolverine you ever see them meet in a comic. They've never seen each other before.
Yeah.
Cable, Logan.
How you doing?
How you doing? Walk by each other, and you're like, what?
What?
Yeah. So you never know. Okay, has this guy been in a comic before, or is this their first time? They would. And also the interesting thing about Marvel versus DC is DC would screw up their continuity, and they're like, let's destroy the universe and make a new one. Marvel would be like, just forget about it, because they sent Scott Summers.
We'll write a time travel thing or something.
Exactly. Well,
on the road,
well, the time travel would mess it up, but they wouldn't care. Like what would happen was they'd sent Scott Summers' kid back in time, or into an alternate timeline, and he had this weird eye. And then Cable showed up in the comics and he had this weird other eye, like the left or right eye. Yeah. And then later it was revealed it was the same kid. Oh. And then it was like, okay, but the eye's not right. Marvel's like, or the arm, there was the wrong arm. Don't worry about it. We messed that up.
Yeah, it's the
this is
guy.
The way it is now. Yeah. Okay, just this is what it is. DC would be like, erase the universe, create a new universe from scratch, and and rewrite it in order. Yeah. So if there's, I don't know if you enjoy that continuity following kind of stuff. I guess that's the book for you. I enjoyed that. I was not able to follow it.
Yeah.
Completely, because it kind of reminded me of that feeling, and I loved holding that big book, because it reminds you of that feeling of.
I didn't have this thought before when I was reading the book, and I actually, when I went in to buy more Hip Hop Family Tree, I was talking to the guy at the comic shop, and I was talking about Grand Design. Because he's like, oh, you got to get Grand Design. It was a different guy. I'm like, I bought it like 2 weeks ago. Okay. And he's like, oh, awesome. I'm like, yeah, but actually, like the writing style, it's like just dumping, just like data diarrhea. Yeah. And it is. Yeah. But I did enjoy it, and I didn't really have it clearly in my mind why I enjoyed it. And I want to go back to what you said at the beginning of the class about nerd currency. Yeah. Like reading this comic book for me is like, it's like sitting down with you and talking about Swamp Thing. Yeah. And I just love that. I love that. I have fond memories of my university days, like sitting with you and listening to you talk for 2 hours really loudly in my basement apartment about Swamp Thing. Yeah. I feel like I'm sitting down with Ed Piskor. Yeah. Instead of yelling at me, he's giving me this beautiful comic book.
I think it's fun to know lots of weird details about these things. To be the guy that knows everything about I had a friend who knew all about Legion of Superheroes, and Legion is fucked. Like, it's such a mess. Yeah. And knowing the details about, they had to do this retcon and all that, and this guy this and this, and there's hundreds of characters in Legion, and I never understood any of it. I loved hearing him talk about it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
It was super fun. I think that it works, and I'm not a huge hip hop guy, but I think that was. I think getting that barrage of information and those facts, like the blackout, to me was something I'll carry that with me for the rest of my life. Yeah. I think that's the selling point for both of them, even if you're not into X-Men or hip hop.
You're getting the story from someone who's passionate about it, and if you have even a passing interest, the beauty and the presentation and the artistry of it, it makes it worthwhile. Yeah, absolutely,
for sure. All right, should we stop it there?
Well, I just have one more thing to say about X-Men Grand Design. I want you to humor me here. Okay. Pick up your book and open to page 34. Okay. I'm going to do the same. Okay. I don't believe that I spotted this, and maybe I didn't. Okay. But I'm going to say 3 words right now. Okay. Stan Lee cameo.
Oh, wow. Holy
Am I crazy?
You're not crazy.
No, right?
Stan Lee doing his obligatory cameo.
I don't know if that. I don't think I'm crazy, but I can't believe one panel.
Like I said, there's so much packed.
So much
it's really
in
he
here.
draws all the details into every background and everything.
It's great. There you go, folks.
Awesome.
Page 34.
Find out more about Ed Piskor's work at edpiskor.com. Here at deconstructingcomics.com, we produce Deconstructing Comics, Critiquing Comics, and To the Bat Poles. If you like our shows and want to support them, pledge at patreon.com/deconcomics. Help us make our next goal and unlock more vintage episodes. Also, please help us get noticed by reviewing us on Apple or any other podcast source. Tell the world why you enjoy Deconstructing Comics. We really need more iTunes reviews, so if you're listening to this, please give us a star rating and a short review. Even if it's just a sentence, let others know why they should choose this podcast over the scads of other shows out there. Another way to show your appreciation is simply to write to us. Email us at mail@deconstructingcomics.com or contact us through social media. Find all the links on the right sidebar at deconstructingcomics.com. We're also on the Comics Podcast Network at comicspodcasts.com and on comicon.com, where our new episodes usually go up on the Friday before they appear in our feed. Our theme is from bensound.com. If you're looking for some constructive feedback on your comic, send it to us and Mulele and I will critique it on our spin-off podcast, Critiquing Comics. Send it to mail@deconstructingcomics.com. We'll read at least 30 pages of it and critique it on the show. We're on summer vacation now, but we'll be back later this month. Last Thursday on To the Bat Poles, Al from the Married with Children podcast joined us to talk about everybody's favorite Season 3 episode, Surf's Up, Joker's Under. Also, Paul announced the winner of his contest for the best alternate lyrics for the Batgirl theme. Listen to the Bat Poles in its own podcast feed on Apple Podcasts or other podcast apps, or at tothebatpoles.libsyn.com. Next week on this show, Coom talks to Ho Che Anderson, creator of a comics biography of Martin Luther King Jr., as well as Scream Queen, Godhead, and more. That's next Monday. Till then, this is Tim, and thanks for listening to Deconstructing Comics.